basically got involved with the paranormal because I grew up in haunted houses. My parents had a knack for checking them out. Doors slamming, lights turning on and off, things moving. It was just always a part of my life. My great-grandmother, their roots are from Ireland. But eventually they moved to Centralia. And that's the side of the family that really has these experiences. It was very normal. Oh, so-and-so has a ghost in their house. Centralia is a coal mining town in the middle of Pennsylvania. And in about 1962, there was a fire that wasn't put out correctly. And it did inspire elements from the movie Silent Hill. But that's not the only true story that inspired movies. There's other ones like Amityville Horror, Poltergeist, and the Mothman Prophecies. They've all hit the big screen, and they were all based on true stories. So I'm going to take a couple of my friends with me on a little road trip, and we're actually going to go meet the real people behind the movies. Every now and again I kind of see hints of, are we actually in danger if we do this? And the truth of the matter is there's crazy stories out there where things do follow people home and they do mess up people's lives and people are physically attacked. And I can't promise them that none of that would happen to them if they do this.
Can they physically hurt you?
Demons?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amityville Horror is based off of Jay Anson's best-selling novel. It basically follows the Lutz family who moved into this house where 6 murders occurred. After 28 days of living there, they had to take off because of all that paranormal activity that they were experiencing.
The Amityville Horror. It's probably the most iconic horror movie in history. It's the model of how to create a good horror movie.
The Amityville Horror was something that truly inspired me to not only become a fan of horror and horror fiction, but also to become a writer of horror fiction. And I've been guilty of taking the drive down Ocean Avenue and looking at the house and using that as inspiration for the house in my novel Dead Souls.
One of the parts that was burned into my memory from the Amityville is those 2 little windows in the house, and every time I, even to this day, drive by a house that has them, I keep going.
Amityville Horror, for me, I think they really captured feelings you would feel being in that situation, to have this new family, a beautiful house, and a beautiful, quiet little neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, literally.
All of the themes, the horror themes that come out in that movie have become almost cliche. Right up to the very end where they all bolt out of the house at the end before, I don't know, the house eats them, I suppose. I mean, you see this in every single horror depiction ever since. You know, run out of the house in the middle of the night like pulling an Amityville, I guess. The question, of course, is, does it have any relationship whatsoever to the events that happened at that house?
Today we're actually going to meet with one of the boys who grew up in the house during the actual haunting.
Up until this point, you've not heard what really happened in that house, or what happened after. It wasn't just because of the murders that had taken place in that house. With what Georgia was doing, that's what triggered the events. That's why it followed us. That's why nobody else has had a problem in that house since. The house was going to be a giant new playground. What it turned into was quite different.
A lot of people believe that Amityville was a demonic case. The Lutzes move in. They have the 28 days of paranormal activity that forces them to leave their brand new house. what caused something to happen to them to leave. It's kind of what we call a perfect storm. The right family, the right time, the right conditions, and that's what led to their house being haunted.
My first thought was I was just excited to see the actual house. And as we started to get closer, I started to think we're going to be right in front of that place. I started to get a little nervous.
Up top there, that was my bedroom.
Kind of weird and shocking to finally be here and to finally see the house. The house looks so different. I don't know, I'm kind of taken back a little bit to be here because it's such a beautiful town, you know, and when you read about it, when you see the movie, I mean, they make it look so creepy. I mean, you would never guess that, you know, 36 years ago, this family had to leave in the middle of the night, you know, because they were hearing knocks and bangs and they were having ghost problems. You would never guess that something like that would have rocked this community to make it national news.
Changing my name, that was my own form of witness protection. For my whole life, this story's been out for 35 years. It's been told, retold. This story's never going to go away. It's a part of American history. It'll probably outsurvive me. You know, a lot of people contest about whether or not anything happened in that house. And I can tell you assuredly that yes, things did happen. They're not the way that they were spoken of publicly. When I read Jay Anson's book, it had portrayed my stepfather as though he was a victim of this house and a hero to our family. Yet the real difference was that they had omitted that George was involved in the occult, calling up these spirits. The fact that it was in that house is what created the storm.
His stepfather was dabbling in the occult very heavily, much more than's been, you know, let known to the public. And Christopher strongly believes that's why all these things happen. That it wasn't only his stepfather dabbling in things he shouldn't have been dabbling in, but he did it in a house that just had 6 murders.
Today, police combed the DeFeo's handsome 3-story house for clues while divers explored the backyard swimming pool for the still unfound murder weapon. Few people in the neighborhood knew the family well, but those who did described them as close-knit.
They were just very sweet, very religious people, very family-minded people. And that's about all I could say. Very good, very generous, this type. Very close with their children.
There's one element in the usual mass murder story which seems to be missing from this case. No feeling of a mass murderer on the loose. People we talked to seem to feel that whatever was the motive for this crime, it had something to do with the family. It's not something that's going to return to bother anyone else. In Amityville, Long Island, Phil Barno, News Center 4.
My parents had a priest come in to bless the home. He'd gone up into what we called our sewing room, and that room was the room of the younger boys of the DeFeo family who had both been murdered in that room. It was the oldest son, shot his mother, shot his father, shot his 2 little brothers, and then 2 younger sisters. All of them in their beds. Nobody heard the shots. When we were first buying the house, we were down in the basement with the real estate agent. And it was my brother, my sister, myself, my mom, and my stepdad. And the real estate agent was there. And I remember asking, is this where they hid the bodies?
I grew up on Long Island, actually not too far from Amityville, and I remember as a 12-year-old boy delivering the New York Daily News. I was a newspaper boy, and I saw the headlines of the DeFeo murder. I'll never forget that. It was chilling and very disturbing.
This morning, DeFeo appeared for arraignment at the 1st District Court in Hauppauge, where he was ordered held without bail. As is standard practice in a multiple murder case, he was arraigned in only one of the killings, that of his 12-year-old brother Mark. The court agreed to let a physician treat DeFeo for injuries to his face, but it refused to allow a psychiatric examination for him.
I don't think he presently understands the nature of the proceedings, and I don't think he can therefore properly assist in his defense.
Simon says he'll continue trying to get the psychiatric examination for his client, and he has not ruled out the possibility that he may enter a plea of insanity.
the Lutzes brought a priest in to bless the house because of all the stuff that happened there beforehand with the murders and everything. And the priest reports that he did hear a voice yell, "Get out."
To come home from school and they said, "We're leaving." Towards the end, there was no question how terrified they were.
So the original Amityville Horror movie in 1979, compare and contrast, what was real, what wasn't?
Well, there's a lot that was absolutely fictionalized. There was no bleeding walls. They took things that were legitimate and overblew them.
I was kind of sad to find out that the bleeding walls in the Amityville movie, that was just Hollywood. And I can't blame them. They got to sell the tickets, so it makes for great theater.
Christopher claims there was activity, but it was on a much lower scale.
For instance, when the priest was in the room to bless that room, there were flies present, not the hundreds that they show. But yes, there was an unusual amount of flies in the house for winter time.
But he wasn't being attacked or swarmed.
No. Look, I was just a little kid when we lived there. I had no say in how the book was written, and then for that movie to be developed the way that it was, or the other ones that followed. What really happened there is much different. What I witnessed in that house still sticks with me today. To see something materialize at your bed that appears like a man, that's as definite as a shadow but not against the wall, for a 7-year-old kid to have to go through that, I was petrified. I couldn't move. I was just like thinking this thing's coming after me. And I wanted to scream for my mother, yet I knew she couldn't be there before this thing could get to me.
I can just picture it right now, him sitting up in bed as a 7-year-old kid. Absolutely terrifying.
Going back to the movie, a big tie in it was the, Native American burial grounds. Any truth to it?
I can't verify for you whether or not that home is built directly on an Indian burial ground. But history records do record that white men mass murdered many Indians in this area.
What you had there is a fairly small population, a very peaceful woodland society of Native Americans who run into greedy Europeans with guns. There was at least one man, Captain John Underhill, who was recruited in the 17th century to go at it. He had done such a great job in the Pequot Wars up in New England, wiping out thousands of Indians there. They said, well, come on down to Long Island. And he proceeded to kill at least 100, probably more, Native Americans living in Long Island. Horrific, horrific tragedies that were taking place at that time.
So you think that maybe there's a tie then between the land, between all these Sonians here on Long Island?
Something's making something go on. There's many stories on Long Island. Even in 1958, the Herman case, not far from here.
How far?
Probably about 5 minutes away.
So you think that maybe there's a tie then between the land, between all these Sonians here on Long Island?
There's many stories on Long Island. Even in 1958, the Herman case, not far from here.
How far?
Probably about 5 minutes away.
Finding out Amityville and the Herman story were within 10-15 minutes of each other. It really kind of drove it home to me that maybe it wasn't just each individual house. Maybe the entire area was kind of dark.
Poltergeist the movie was released in 1982 and was a huge box office success. A lot of people believe that Poltergeist is actually based off of the Herman case in 1958 on Long Island.
Seaford, Long Island. The Herman family starts experiencing some truly inexplicable and bizarre and frightening activity in their house.
Everything was very normal until that day in February 1958. My parents tried to keep our life as normal as possible when you have flying objects in your house.
Small pieces of furniture started flying around the house, figurines, lamps, my brother's globe. Finally, my father said, enough of this, and he said, I'm calling the police. And that's why it became a police case. Perhaps maybe unlike the other cases, ours was a police case.
No crime had been committed. What was happening gave no sign of being a threat to the physical well-being of the Herman family. Was this a legitimate matter for the police? The decision was yes. And so on Tuesday, February 11th, Sergeant Joseph Tozzi was assigned to full-time duty on the case. And here is Sergeant Tozzi. Joe, suppose you outline for us your exact procedure just as soon as you were assigned to the case.
First, of course, I met with the Herman family and had a number of talks with them. I worked out the position of every member of the family at the time of every incident. Then I took a sampling of the bottles that were involved, sent them to the police laboratory for analysis.
And their report?
Negative.
All of a sudden, you'd hear this very strange, loud noise, like a popping bottle sound, and it was, well, what is that? So you go running towards the noise, you look around for 1 second, you see that things are not where they were supposed to be, and then you would eventually find a bottle that was maybe 12 feet away from where it was. You went to the bottle, and all the contents inside of it were completely gone, evaporated, and the bottle was very hot to the touch.
In the following month, there were a number of other incidents. Tables moved, lamps fell over, pictures turned off balance, a phonograph smashed across a room, figurines dropped from their places, and there were strange noises in the house. The Hermans live in this modest green-trimmed ranch house in Seaford, Long Island.
Just about everything that wasn't nailed down decided it wanted to fly all around.
The phonograph flew from this table across the room, hit the shadow box, and made a dent here. And of course my brother and I missed playing the phonograph very much, and it landed on the floor and broke.
There was a very large bookcase that weighed a couple of 100 pounds, and it lifted up into the air and flew across the basement, probably about 6 feet before it fell down to the cement floor of the basement.
Is this the bookcase, Mrs. Herman?
That's right, Mr. Morrow, and as you can see, it's quite a heavy piece of furniture. This made the loudest crash. I thought the whole house caved in.
With the Herman case, we're talking 1958, conservative, Long Island. So here you have this family saying, you know, our bookshelves are moving and things are flying across the room. People are going to raise an eyebrow at that and say, it's got to be somebody faking it, right?
This is Jim Jr.
Evening, Jimmy. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Morrow.
Just what happened here in your room, anyway?
Well, one of the things that happened in my room, Mr. Morrow, was this globe. It flew off the top of this bookcase and right through my door and into the living room and crashed onto the living room floor.
The big turning point in this case was a writer from Newsday, David Kahn, actually came to Long Island, stayed in the house because he was a skeptic and didn't believe it, and he actually experienced the activity that they were claiming to have happened.
There was a lot of suspicion that the kid was doing it or that there were some hanky-panky going on, and I wanted to see what the actual situation was, and they invited me over. That was the night I was positioning myself in the living room facing Jim Herman's room, the boy's room, and out from that room flew a globe of the world.
My brother and I went to our regular routine, went to bed, so did my parents. Mr. Kahn sat up in the living room waiting to catch an event. Very late into the evening, a globe that my brother had in his bedroom came flying from my brother's bedroom before it landed on the floor in the living room.
I immediately dashed into the room to see whether I could catch Jim Herman doing it. He was in his bed with the covers pulled up.
After that incident, the stories that he wrote for Newsday, you know, he was a believer of our events and not skeptical.
It definitely solidified that you were a believer in the events that were happening in the Herman house.
Yes, it did.
Lucille, how did you feel about the strange things that were happening at your house?
It was pretty scary. I didn't like it.
We opened our house to every qualified investigator who was interested. Scientists, engineers, those who might come up with a legitimate answer.
They had paranormal investigators come over from Duke University to observe all the activity going on in the house.
The Duke team, like everyone else who came to investigate this, came away with the idea that, yes, this was a legitimate phenomenon. This is not a hoax. And they hypothesized that a lot of this was revolving around the son, who was, I think, 14 years old at the time, James Jr. The idea was floated out there, and I think this has become a very common idea in paranormal research now, is that adolescents, primarily girls but also boys, seem to be a magnet for entities.
It's very literally this person that's giving off all this energy, and they're causing the activity around them.
Science has been taking a long, hard second look at many of these unusual occurrences. In 1930, this work took a giant step forward with the establishment at Duke University of its now famous parapsychology laboratory. Tonight, we have with us Dr. J. Gaither Pratt, Assistant Director of the laboratory, who spent 10 days at the Herman House on Long Island investigating the case. Dr. Pratt, what brought you to Seaford?
The typical poltergeist case centers around some youngster in the turbulent teens. Certainly it is always associated with some living person. The Seaford case may have great significance for our research if we could not explain these incidents in ordinary psychological terms, such as hallucinations or pranks. Then the possibility remained that they might be parapsychological.
There was a time toward the end of this, and it only lasted just over a month, that it got actually really scary.
We left the house only one night in the total 6 weeks of the event, and that was when Detective Joseph Tazi was there with us. It was a very volatile night. Things were moving and flying all around the house, probably almost about every 30 seconds.
My father was a no-nonsense detective. Even on his deathbed, that the case was still eating at him because, like I said in the beginning, he was a cop, and there's no ghosts. And then at the end, he just hated that the case was never solved, and he couldn't solve it. And I think he became a believer.
Well, so far as you're concerned, then, a complete mystery?
I can offer no acceptable explanation. I'm afraid that's true of the entire case. The file is still open. I was on the case during the entire series of disturbances. For that matter, I'm still on the case. We don't feel we're any nearer to a solution now than when we started. So far as the police are concerned, we must list this case as unsolved.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Tazi.
There really hasn't been a good understanding as to why it started and why it ended.
It's still an open case on the Seaford Police Department books. They never closed the case because it was never solved.
You've got very credible people, journalists, professional journalists, police, who attested to these very bizarre things happening.
It was really, really amazing to meet Lucille because she's the actual family member who inspired the poltergeist phenomena.
This was the case, incidentally, where the word poltergeist made its way into popular lingo. I mean, everyone really knew about this. It was very widely publicized at the time.
There's a lot of controversy as to what Poltergeist the movie is actually based off of. You can see elements of the real-life case in the movie, such as furniture stacking. Paranormal researchers coming and trying to figure out what's really happening in the house, very similar to Lucille's case.
How long have you been investigating haunted houses?
Well, Mrs. Freelinger. Diane. The determination as to whether your home is haunted is not very easy. What I meant to say was it might very well be a poltergeist intrusion instead of a classic haunting.
There was a lamp in the real house that moved over to the other side of the room, turn on, turn off and on. In the movie, you can see clearly as everything's whirling around and the paranormal investigators come in, kind of comes by, light bulb screws in, turns on. So that's definitely a nod to the real story.
In the Poltergeist movie, when stuff is getting sucked out of the bedroom, very prominent in the shots, big globe.
When all the things are getting sucked into the vortex of the closet, there's a big world globe that comes rolling in.
There are some definite ties that even if Spielberg doesn't really say he takes a story directly from the Hermans, you can kind of make that leap.
And then, of course, there's things that didn't really happen in real life, like the tree coming and taking the boy away. The little girl getting sucked into the closet. Communicating through the TV. Obviously, that never happened in the Herman case.
The Herman's house did not get sucked into a vortex. We saw the house. We know. We could see it. I think my favorite scene in Poltergeist is when the paranormal investigator's in the bathroom and his face is melting off and it's just dripping into the sink and he's just pulling flesh off of his face and you see his skull and everything. And that part really stuck with me. I have dreams about that sometimes. Yeah, I was kind of sad to find out that didn't occur.
Things flew around the house, and that much we can say they have in common for sure.
All over Long Island, there were just Native Americans that were slaughtered. That's what Dan Martinez was telling us.
Dan was telling us about this Indian burial ground that had a lot of paranormal activity and a lot of reports of some creepy stuff going on.
He's been here, and he's had stuff happen. There's an actual poltergeist curse where a bunch of people that were actually in the film died prematurely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean the actual movie?
Do you know why they say there's a curse around the film? It also has to do with bones.
So the guys went off to talk to Dan Martinez so we could get a better feel for where the supercharged places are on the island so we could explore them.
A lot of people said that things were occurring because of Indian burial grounds, like sacred ground.
Recently, a local university uncovered Native American bones that they do believe are part of some of the phenomenon happening around here.
His biggest kind of revelation to us was that the entire island has all kinds of paranormal activity, due mostly to Indian burial grounds scattered all over the place.
The guys came back saying that there's actually, an Indian burial ground that's not too far from where we were.
Dan was telling us about this Indian burial ground that had a lot of paranormal activity and a lot of reports of some creepy stuff going on. So that's where we decided we were going to go.
This is creepy. So what do you look for when you're looking for Indian burial grounds?
Maybe kind of unmarked graves, little mounds. All over Long Island, there were just Native Americans that were slaughtered. That's what Dan Martinez was telling us.
He's like firm believer that the Indian burial grounds here are causing activity.
He said that they've definitely looked into that sort of thing, and that's why he's like, yeah, this is a place with intensity, high activity.
He's been here.
Yeah.
And he's had stuff happen.
Makes me think that, what's underneath.
You think we're standing on bodies?
I don't know. It's kind of creepy. Freaks me out.
All right, hand.
Here. Oh.
And
I was just freaked out to be walking on top of an Indian burial ground, which a lot of people say is a cause for a lot of paranormal activity all over that place. Whenever we saw a mound, the first thing we thought was, oh, maybe there are Indian bones in there. Let's go step on the mound in the Indian burial ground. Well, nothing bad could come out of that. Look at this. Look at this.
Ooh, those are serious mounds.
Go check it out.
No, you go ahead. You are just so chivalrous.
All right, hold on. Just hold on.
Go ahead.
Manners don't stop being important in the woods. Charity was scared. She was terrified to be walking around this burial ground. So I just wanted to make sure she knew she was in good hands. Complete lie. But if she felt better, then I felt better. This is freaky. Look at this. This is huge.
There's like a whole tribe of Indians buried here. I hope we don't fall into
grave. It'd be like that scene in Poltergeist, or swimming among dead Indian bodies.
Stop. This doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
And look at this thing. I don't know if I want to walk on the mound.
Going to Indian burial grounds is always an iffy thing to do. I just think it's asking for trouble.
There was apparently a man that was hired, basically as a hitman, to take out like 100 Native Americans.
There's an actual poltergeist curse where a bunch of people that were actually in the film died prematurely.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the actual movie?
Do you know why they say there's a curse around the film? It also has to do with bones. Like in that scene where the mom falls into the pool and it's raining and the mud's falling into the pool and then all the bodies start coming out of the soil, those were real bodies. It was more expensive to buy fake bodies than to use real cadaver bones. And so that's why everybody says that the film was actually cursed.
So do you want to see if we can find Charity and John?
Yeah, we should probably head back and just team up, make sure no one's lost. So it's back this way.
Okay.
Up this little hill right here.
What person dies and says, I'd like to dedicate my body to art and movies? So Charity is just laying out all these details about this curse, and pretty much it's because they used real bones, real skeletons. At the end of the movie in the pool, when all the bodies are coming up, those are real people, or they once were anyway. So she's telling me the story. We're out in the middle of nowhere, standing on this mound in an Indian burial ground. I mean, that was enough for me. I was ready to go. Suddenly, packing onto the RV and heading to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, hunting for Mothman didn't seem like such a bad idea.
I have talked to people, a lot of people who've seen, whatever this thing was, and they weren't real thrilled about it.
Witnesses of the Mothman figure did come away with this feeling that the Mothman was dangerous.
My brother noticed it running or flying beside the car.
It came over top of the car. This thing had a 12-foot wingspan.
Ooh.
What was that?
Living on the RV, you don't really have to brush your teeth. You just have to hold your toothbrush. And the highway and the rocking from the RV will brush the teeth for you. It's kind of like a dentist you don't have to pay for.
The Mothman Prophecies was released in 2002 and is actually based off of John Keel's book of the same name, The Mothman Prophecies.
John Keel went to Point Pleasant because there were a whole lot of UFO sightings going on there at the time. And in fact, 1966 was a major year of UFO activity in the entire United States. And Point Pleasant was a major scene of activity as well. And it's when Keel is there that he learns of these really strange sightings that people were having. Of this creature.
The Mothman Prophecies was a great psychological thriller. I mean, that definitely got into my head, and that was preying pretty hard on me as we were pulling into West Virginia.
Chris would seem a little uneasy about Mothman, and I never really sat down and talked with him about it, but my guess would be because nobody knows what it is. Is it an alien? Is it an interdimensional being? Is it a species that we have yet to identify? Did it cause the Silver Bridge collapse? Is this thing bringing doom wherever it goes? Or is it a warning sign that something bad's going to happen? There's all these elements of mystery and unknowns surrounding Mothman. When you first arrive in Point Pleasant, it's very scary to think, what if one day he comes back?
Point Pleasant kind of reminds me of a town that I grew up in. But at the same time, this looked like the town from the movie.
It does look a lot like the movie, and it kind of brings you right into the 1960s when everything was going on with Mothman and when the Silver Bridge collapsed. We're about to meet with Jeff Wamsley, who is the curator of the Mothman Museum.
November 15th, 1966, there were two young couples riding around the TNT area. And that was a military installation during World War II. About 11 o'clock that night, they were getting ready to come back into town. As they were driving by this North Power Plant, they came up on what they thought was just a man standing in the road. As they got closer, Linda Scarberry, one of the people in the car, saw two red eyes, about the size of baseballs, 2 inches apart. It came over top of the car. They realized that this thing had a 12-foot wingspan. They first met with the Sheriff's Department. I have 3 of the 4 original handwritten depositions. It all tells the story. There was a local newspaper reporter named Mary Heyer. She broke the story. She wrote about all this in the local newspapers. Everybody read the newspaper. What she put in her articles, people would read it on a daily basis. She joined forces with John Keel. They tried to solve the mystery. You had a lot of strange things, Mothman sightings, the UFO sightings, then you had these men in black intimidating the witnesses. The bridge collapsed, 46 people perished. It all happened within, a year and a half of the original sightings and stuff. I was only 6 years old, when that happened. But, I distinctly remember hearing it, almost 5 miles away.
Physically, you heard the bridge collapse.
Sound like a sonic boom.
How accurate is the movie, really?
Well, the movie was more of a mental type thriller, and it was loosely based on John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. He came here when all this was happening, documented everything, and in 1975 released this book about, all the activity here in Point Pleasant. And in the movie, I think, Richard Gere's character has a, loss of time. And now John Keel personally told me of a few experiences that, that he had.
Richard Gere gets in his car and just drives because he can't sleep. And his car breaks down. He knocks on a door. The door opens and there's a guy with a gun pointing it right in his face. I thought the movie was over. Well, it was the shortest movie ever made. Richard Gere's about to get shot in the face.
Laura Linney was the town sheriff. There was never a woman sheriff in Point Pleasant.
Things have just been a little strange around here lately.
The man who they found dead, by the tree, Will Patton, he actually came here to Point Pleasant for that movie filmed and researched the town. I had a chance to meet him and stuff, but nobody was ever physically harmed or killed. The movie did well, and it brought the name and the story pretty much through the floodgates. It changed the town here because I think they mentioned the name Point Pleasant 12, 14 times in the movie.
Do you think Laura Linney's character was based on the newspaper writer that was so significant in the case?
Yeah, loosely it was based on Mary Heyer because John Keel and Mary Heyer, Richard Gere and Laura Linney, they were kind of a team trying to figure this out. Richard Gere's character, I think, was kind of a combination of John Keel, and then there was the older guy in the movie, Alexander Leak, which is actually Keel spelled backwards.
Alexander Leak! Who the hell are you? I'm John Klein. I called you last week. Where are they seeing it? Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
He's getting, these weird, strange phone calls. Is that something that happened to John Keel while he was here? Really?
Yeah, he was very, I wouldn't say paranoid, but he was aware of his surroundings. As a matter of fact, I used to talk to him on the phone, and when I would call him, he was very, who is this? I would say who I was. Oh, okay.
Keel got phone calls and communications from this Indrid Cold character. This is something that the movie took slight liberties with, but fundamentally, there was this mysterious individual who communicated with Keel, who seemed to have a lot of knowledge about what was going on, very mysterious. I freaked Keel out a little bit.
Laura Linney's character has this, dream about falling in the water before the bridge collapsed. Is that true?
Mary Hire herself, had told John Keel that she had a dream of Christmas presents floating in the water and stuff, which would have represented the bridge collapse at Christmas time. The Mothman prophecies kind of portrayed that Silver Bridge collapses as a direct result of this Mothman, or warning everybody of doom and disaster.
One day, I started hearing voices. The voices became messages. Before long, I was fully convinced that I was receiving predictions of disaster from outside intelligences. But you were, weren't you? John, I had tapes of their voices. I knew a building was going to blow up, and I tried to prevent it, but no one listened.
Keel stated that there were these predictions or prophecies that were made mysteriously to him that portended something bad was going to happen. He thought some big explosion was going to take place. He didn't know there was going to be a bridge that was going to go.
Cancel the tour. Cancel it. Make them shut down the plant now. The plant's going to blow up for you. State police? Where are the cops? What are they doing? They don't know. It's Governor McCallum. What do you say? They don't know yet. Have you received a bomb threat? I didn't say anything about a bomb. What's the source? Hey, I struck the sounds. You're messing up here, John. Get me Cyrus bills at the post.
I think Mothman actually does a really good job of explaining a lot of the real facts that happened in real life. But there's a lot of little things that, they changed for the movie, such as, the year. In real life, it happened from 1966 to 1967. In the movie, it's a modern-day film. Richard Gere's character is based off of John Keel. John Keel never worked for the Washington Post, although he was a journalist at the time. There's this one part of the movie where Richard Gere goes back to the spot where he and his wife had their car accident, and he's kind of obsessively looking, what did my wife see, what happened, and he's out of his car, he's on the street, and something kind of catches his eye, and it's these construction, I don't know what they are, tubes or whatever, and they have red reflectors on top of them, and that's what he's looking at. And I thought that was really cool because one of the original witnesses said that when she saw Mothman, his eyes looked like reflectors. That's how red and that's how bright they were.
I have talked to people, a lot of people who've seen, whatever this thing was, and they weren't real thrilled about it. I think the question just kind of remained as, what was it? Why did we have to see it? Why did it come towards us,
Witnesses of the Mothman figure did come away with this feeling that he was not fun to play with, that the Mothman was dangerous. The Mothman did strike terror into the hearts of these witnesses. That much is true.
This is the spot where you saw Mothman.
Yes, we had just turned on the drive up here from the main road, and we were about halfway down this road when my brother noticed it running or flying beside the car. All I seen was eyes going great big at the front and going to a point.
This is the spot where you saw Mothman.
Yes, we had just turned on the drive up here from the main road, and we were about halfway down this road when my brother noticed it running or flying beside the car. And when we stopped, it jumped on the hood of our car. It sat there and looked at him, and then me, and then him and me, and then turned and stood up and jumped down off the car and ran a few feet and then jumped up on that big factory building. I would say about halfway down that road. My brother said, well, don't look. So I turned to see it. It was right by the window. My brother saw the driveway. It took you up in there to where the old factories were. When he stopped it like that, it jumped up on the hood of our car and just kind of squatted and just looked at him and then at me and then him and me. And then it jumped off the car. It just ran right by us. It jumped up to the top and it kind of just sat there just watching us, unfolded the biggest set of wings. The only thing I can say is an angel's wings, because it was big wings enough to carry a full human. I think to this day they got it and zipped it and shut it up.
We're here at the spot where the Silver Bridge collapsed.
December 15th, 1966. It was around 5 o'clock. The bridge in Ohio, so it was bumper to bumper with people shopping. It was a night I don't think any of us will ever forget. A piece of the bridge that held up the suspension wires faltered and broke and gave way, and the bridge tilted and dumped about half the cars off of it immediately, and then it tilted the other direction and dropped the other half of the cars in the river, and then it fell on top of all the people in the river. A lot of people thought one of our plants exploded. It was just such a boom when that piece gave way. My mother was right at the foot of the bridge. She told me she saw cars and Christmas gifts floating in the river. In the movie, it shows people trying to get out of their cars, and there was no chance to even react. The bridge went down immediately. They couldn't even get the doors open to get out, and of course when they went in the river anyway, it was hypothermia immediately.
Get off! Get off! Get off!
Only one person who landed on the bank, and one fellow who went into the edge of the river survived. The mayor at the time, his parents was on the bridge, and of course we know everybody here. A little girl in my third grade class went down with her entire family. They never found her either.
Never found her.
No, some of them were never found.
In the film, they lost, it said 36 people. Well, they actually lost more people. They lost, I believe, 46 people.
Dredging operations continue in the aftermath of the tragic collapse of Silver Bridge, which spilled over 50 vehicles into the rushing waters of the Ohio River. The collapse came at the height of the evening rush hour, while traffic on the span was lined up bumper to bumper. The quarter-mile-long suspension bridge suddenly plunged 100 feet into the water with a tremendous roar. No reason for the collapse has yet been found. 16 bodies are recovered, while 44 persons are still reported missing. Police officials estimate that the death toll may go as high as 80. Fire, police, and civil defense officials work round the clock in the search for victims. Authorities believe that many of the submerged vehicles containing bodies were swept far downstream in the river's 60-foot deep main channel or have been buried in the riverbed. An incredible disaster which shocks the nation and touches hundreds of families with tragedy.
We had the Silver Bridge collapse, which, kind of spawns these theories of, is Mothman this, does Mothman bring danger to a town, or is it trying to warn of danger, or is it there to observe when horrible things happen? With that many people seeing this thing and having the same description, I don't think it's possible for them to all make it up.
What we've got right here is some of the props, the police uniforms used in the motion picture, The Mothman Prophecies. These are modeled after the actual Point Pleasant City Police uniforms. As a matter of fact, some of the city police from here went up there and were extras in the movie. John Keel always thought that Point Pleasant, it was a window to all this abnormal activity.
You mean a portal?
That's what he claimed, yeah.
Did he ever mention where he thought, the portal might have been?
In the TNT area. There's areas up there where you can go. There's no birds chirping. There's no sounds of insects at all. It's just dead silence. He would go up there in the 3-4 o'clock in the morning.
Is that safe though?
Well, probably not.
So I am standing at the genesis of Mothman in Point Pleasant. It's right behind me. There's the pool where Mothman was seen. The TNT factory was over here. They were coming the opposite direction. And that's when they spotted him over there. And Jeff had mentioned that, how tonight is really, really clear. It's kind of crisp in the air. There's lots of stars. He said when he spoke to Linda that that's the kind of night it was when they saw Mothman. Perfect. So the igloos here, they're part of the TNT factory, okay? And during World War II, they were used as storage facilities for TNT. Right? There's tons of them out there. From what I understand, a year and a half ago, one of them exploded. So,
Exploded?
Be careful, be on your toes. What's running through your mind? What's the worst case scenario that could happen out here?
Mothman swoops in and takes us off and kills us. I mean, what else? What could be worse than that?
Chris, are you stoked?
Yeah, man. We're less stoked.
That scares me out here. If somebody's doing something bad, they're probably hanging out in the woods.
Why you gotta bring this up?
I did bad stuff in the woods, so, yeah.
You did?
Makes sense.
What kind of bad stuff?
Not bad, just drinking and fires. Guys are starting to wonder that. I heard it down there.
What'd you hear?
Sound like something walking.
Doesn't sound like wing flapping, does it?
Be quiet. Oh, crap.
Something over there.
Oh.
Ooh.
This is starting to not get cool.
Why are we choosing to go on?
You guys scared?
Be quiet. Crap.
Something over there.
Oh.
Ooh.
What was that?
What was it?
Something that's not happy that we're standing right here.
What was it? Listen.
You guys hear that?
What?
Dude, I just heard it was like a growl.
That ain't cool, man. This is starting to not get cool.
Why are we choosing to go on?
You guys scared?
Dude, this one definitely makes me nervous. Right. I don't know.
Okay, we're okay.
That was man. John, you alright, man?
I'm laughing, I'm scared. Me too. Oh my gosh.
That scared the me.
Let's go.
That scared the me.
I know.
Serious.
I know. I swear I heard wings. I'm not saying this enough, man. At one point, we all turned, and I start running. I didn't even, see anything come out of the woods, but once I saw the camera person running, I took off.
I don't know if I'll ever get over that scare. I mean, my chest is still, tight and hurting. That was just so shocking, and I don't want to ever feel that kind of fear ever again.
My rational brain wants to try and explain it, but I really can't explain it. It was loud and really close. It sounded like something huge, like a huge person jumped out of the sky and landed on the ground about 4 feet from where I was standing, and mayhem happened. Everybody just freaked out and ran. I'm grabbing my flashlight trying to find it. People are bumping into me, but I can't see anything.
Poor Chris, and they come running at him, and he looks like a door on a holiday blowout sale.
I was happy to leave Point Pleasant. I mean, to me, leaving and going to Centralia was the right thing to do.
I'm taking everybody to Centralia, which has a very personal tie to me. My family, my grandmother's side, is actually from there. Centralia is a coal mining town in the middle of Pennsylvania, and in about 1962 there was a fire that wasn't put out correctly, and it did inspire elements in the movie Silent Hill. The movie came out in 2006, and it's actually based off of the video game Silent Hill. The movie is really interesting. It just takes you through this whole isolated town with ash falling from the sky. And here's this woman desperately looking for her daughter, and she is absolutely on her own. It's very reminiscent of Centralia in many ways. There's nobody around. The ashes falling from the sky. And obviously, Centralia being on fire, there's a pretty strong connection between those two. The only building standing in Centralia is a church at the top of this hill. Here you have it in the movie.
The people in Centralia, Pennsylvania are threatened by fire burning below their town. What's burning is coal, and it's been burning for years. Today, the state offered mobile homes to 3 families whose houses are threatened. More on the fire from Rebecca Sobel.
Centralia, Pennsylvania. The town has lived over a burning coal mine for the past 20 years. That's carbon monoxide coming out of those pipes. Carbon dioxide, too. Pipes puffing the deadly smoke stick up everywhere in town, a constant reminder of the fire below. The fire started here on the outskirts of town. 20 years ago, people were dumping trash in an open mine pit. Someone set the trash on fire. Sunday, St. Ignatius Church. While most of the people in the town go to Mass, Ed Narkavich, an inspector for the Pennsylvania Bureau of Mine Safety, goes from house to house, checking poisonous smoke levels coming from the burning mine. Last week, the ground collapsed here under a 12-year-old boy. He saved himself by grabbing a tree root. He's okay physically, but
I'm scared. I'm afraid to go to school. I always walk near trees and near fences, so I never go outside anymore to play.
Staying inside isn't healthy either. Carbon monoxide levels in these homes are dangerously high.
We go to bed at night and we just pray we get up in the morning.
If you were in a high enough concentration for a number of hours, eventually you would die.
But people can't be buried in the town cemetery anymore. The ground's too hot. The fire hasn't killed anyone here yet, but it is killing this town.
Centralia, Pennsylvania is one of the most tragic and kind of creepy stories in modern America. Now, this is a coal town, and that was a thriving small town, a couple of thousand people. In 1962, one of the abandoned coal mines was used as a landfill, and as was very common in those days, people would burn the trash. Well, in this case, unfortunately, the fire that was burning was very, very close to an anthracite coal vein. and an enormous underground fire took place. And underneath the town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the coal continued to burn and burn and burn, and it is burning to this day. The fire would cause sinkholes to appear out of nowhere, and there was nearly a fatality of a young 12-year-old boy in the early 1980s who was only rescued by his cousin who happened to be very close by and pulled him right out. Within 20 years of the start of that fire, the town had to be evacuated. It had become unlivable. You go to Centralia now, and it's a ghost town.
So when we got to Centralia, there was just nothing there. I mean, this was a town that had saloons and barbershops and grocery stores, neighbors and, you know, kids playing in the street. And now there's nothing there but rubble and smoke. It's not a happy place.
Seeing the smoke come out of the ground, for some reason the first thing I thought of was hell, you know? You're taught heaven is up, hell is down. You see the smoke, but you don't... The idea that a raging fire is going on below your feet, it just doesn't really click.
What's happening is the coal fires are burning, and, you know, the earth just finally gives way and sinks in, and then they just fill it back in with just fill dirt. It was dangerous to be there.
You go down and put your hand towards the hole that steam is coming out of. It's really hot. I mean, my hand started like getting all red and a little burn a little bit just from touching the hole.
Roger Avery visited the town of Centralia. That really gave him inspiration for some elements in the movie Silent Hill. Not being able to come into the town on certain roads. That's very much how Centralia is set up.
Sorry, sir, this road is closed. You'll have to turn around.
I'm looking for my wife. She may have come through here. She drives a Jeep Liberty.
Sir, this man's wife was driving the Jeep.
The movie's kind of creepy. They have these like human, I don't even know what they are, these human monsters. These humans are very distorted and kind of grotesque looking, and it looks like they've been tortured for years. There's no danger of being eaten by, you know, these horrible figures in Centralia, but you can definitely see where Avery got his inspiration from. This is one part where a siren goes off. You can almost imagine, you know, it being like an evacuation siren, which, of course, everybody in Centralia had to evacuate, and it kind of ties that all together. Who's ever left in the town has to all huddle inside this, you know, isolated church for protection from all the monsters. In Centralia, literally one of the only buildings that is standing is this huge, beautiful church at the top of the hill.
The whole town is a great story in and of itself. Just kind of like the surreal imagery and feeling of what was happening. The only human presence you can see in the town are the cemeteries. In most places, people move on, people die. And what stands are their homes, their stories. Now it's just their headstones.
They say the fires have consumed the whole town, and they are now approaching the cemeteries.
A lot of stories about people having, you know, experienced ghosts here. One guy saw 3 miners. They looked as clear as day to him. So I want to check out this one location. It's an old mine. Apparently it's really, really haunted. People have had experiences there. And they hear very distinct footsteps behind them. They heard it's pretty crazy and active. So I think we should maybe go check that out.
I can't wait.
There's other people claiming to hear disembodied voices of children. When I was about 10 or 12, somewhere in that age range, my parents took me and my siblings to Centralia. And, you know, we didn't have family there anymore. Everybody had been evacuated. But I think it was one of those things like, you know, get one last look because this isn't going to be here in a couple years. And so they kind of wanted us to see where some of our family history is from and what the town looked like. And I remember there being streets of houses. I remember there being families. And I didn't really comprehend what was going on. Our parents had told us that the town was on fire and that it would probably never be put out and all these people had to leave. There was a fire literally underneath their feet, and that's very hard to process when you're a little kid. I think it's hard to process as an adult. Centralia looks nothing like I remember, and that was only, 15 years ago.
Katrina, her family comes from Centralia, and so you could tell it was starting to get pretty personal for her.
We're about to meet one of my cousins named Joe, so I'm really excited to hear what he has to say because he knows a lot of history of the town, and he's also apparently had some ghostly encounters while he's been in Centralia. Any ghost stories in Centralia or any weird paranormal things that happened when you were living there?
Driving one night on a mountain, I rounded the turn. The guy just stood out like this here. I thought, oh my gosh, and I turned. I think I hit him, I don't know. I really didn't know. I said, I better stop. I said, I hope he's all right. Nothing.
You didn't find anybody?
I couldn't find nothing, but there was a cemetery to the right of me.
Oh.
Even now, thinking about it, now I get a little excited about it,
Joe's believable. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would make stories up just for attention. He's very truthful, very honest. So that's the vibe I got from him anyway.
My daughter stepped down my mother's place one night, and she had an experience down there. She was staying in the one room, and all of a sudden she comes screaming out of the room. This is true. My daughter wouldn't go back in that room as long as she went down there, and she come out screaming, "There's someone in my room! There's someone in my room!" She has long hair, black long hair.
Katrina's cousin Joe, he told us this story about his daughter and how she saw a figure of Katrina's great-great-grandmother.
Well, now what about the Molly Maguires?
Centralia was founded by Alexander Ray. He was going to Montcalm one night, and he was murdered. That's what started this thing with the curse.
There was a priest in the town named Father McDermott. He was very, very upset with the things that were going on in Centralia, and there's stories that say he actually said this town will go up in flames. This town will cease to exist. And that's where this whole element of a curse comes in for Centralia. Now, the Molly Maguires, there were 3 of them that were hung for the murder of Alexander Ray. People say they did not do it. There's people still trying to fight for their innocence.
In a poor irony, you can say that these men truly were railroaded. They were destroyed by a railroad company every step of the way and had really no opportunity, no chance for a fair trial. The owner of the Reading Railroad didn't really care so much about the murder of this superintendent so much as using this case as an opportunity to destroy the labor movement as it existed at that time, to destroy the Irish leadership of the workers in the railroads and in the coal industry. It was a bloody, bloodthirsty, really shameful, disgraceful period of American history in many ways. These 3 men were almost certainly innocent. Horrible injustice of this. You've gone through a trial that is so patently unfair, and now you've been sentenced to hang. The noose is around your neck. You're ready to die. And then comes a moment where you drop. But instead of the standard drop, which is 5 inches or more, in this case, these men drop 3 inches. And the difference means that their necks didn't break. And what that meant is that they writhed on the noose for 10 minutes, strangling to death slowly. What a horrible, horrible ending to a story that should never have happened to begin with.
I'm not surprised this town is haunted. I mean, people were betrayed.
People hear disembodied children's voices. 3 dead coal miners appearing out of nowhere, a young girl walking around, and we're going out to investigate at night.
So I want to check out this one location. It's an old mine. Apparently it's really, really haunted.
They've heard lots of voices, seen coal miners walk in and then just disappear.
Don't feel alone down here at all. You kind of portray the town as being like kind of this haunted little town. I mean, do you think that's a fair assessment of it?
Yes. Yeah, it could be, sure.
You wouldn't go there at night?
No, I don't think I'd like to be walking around the town at night, because I think there are eerie things about the town, I would say there'd be a haunting probably going on there yet. No, I wouldn't feel comfortable, let me put it that way. No.
Hearing Joe talk about this stuff, and then it's not just me, it ran through my entire family. All of this kind of blows my mind. I'm not surprised this town is haunted. I mean, people were betrayed. Something people have always told me is that it really, really upsets them thinking about people who have passed away sticking around. And I'm feeling a little emotional about the fact that my relatives could still be hanging around Centralia haunting it.
Think about the town you live in and all the experiences you have growing up in that town, and now it's gone, and now there's nothing. So Katrina had a sense of, she was sad about that.
This is where Centralia was first formed, right here, actually.
Right there?
Yeah, that's Ray's Hill. They call it Ray's Hill, R-E-A-S.
That's the guy who was allegedly killed by the Molly Maguires.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Right here is where I used to live, right here.
Right down there?
Right here, yeah. When I was a kid, this was a playground. You can still see remnants there. You have the steps over there. This is where I played when I was a kid. Your great-great-grandmother, she lived right down the corner there.
Right down here on this side?
Right there. We see the street starts down there?
Yeah.
She was right across the street there.
Oh, really?
That's where your grandmother came to visit, was there. She'd come back to stay at my mother's. You don't know how many relations you have just living in this one section here.
It's very, very overwhelming to be here. I think what's really upsetting about being here is this, I guess, kind of like feeling what these people must have felt, knowing that their homes were going to be torn down, their history was going to be taken away from them, and I don't know, I think that's the scariest part, because even when we die, I mean, that's what we leave behind. We leave behind, and as crazy as it sounds, but we leave behind that material stuff. Our houses, our furniture, that's where Billy and Tommy used to play ball. That's where we used to have our Sunday brunch with the family. And it's all gone, and it's so different from when I was here. It's so different. And what scares me is that, once my family's gone, once everybody who lived here is gone, nobody's going to know about this town, and all that's going to be left are ghost stories.
Some of the stories that have survived the town's downfall, people hear disembodied children's voices. 3 dead coal miners appearing out of nowhere. A young girl walking around. And we're going out to investigate at night.
So I want to check out this one location. It's an old mine. Apparently it's really, really haunted. People have had experiences there. And they hear very distinct footsteps behind them. One guy saw 3 miners. They looked as clear as day to him. I'm sure we'll be fine, but there's always that little bit of doubt behind you, what if I really do experience something? Because it doesn't matter how many times you experience something, it's still scary. What's really, really creepy about this and about Silent Hill is just that feeling of isolation. This is actually kind of reminding me of it right now, because I can't see 4 feet in front of my face.
It's like I've never been in a mine. Yeah, just throw him in there by himself. No big deal. Whatever. Thanks, Katrina.
Well, they definitely said that they've heard lots of voices, seen coal miners walk in and then just disappear.
I can barely see anything. Awesome. If that's some dead miner's tools, I don't want to piss him off. The coal vein that runs through here is the same one that's burning up Centralia.
This is the stuff that burns and burns and burns underneath Centralia, you know, just completely burning.
Really? Wow, so it's totally connected to the Centralia fires underground?
Yeah, man, so, wow.
I don't feel alone down here at all.
What was that noise?
Did you hear walking?
I thought I heard something coming from the ceiling area.
Oh my gosh.
Man, this is nuts. This is friggin' nuts.
I totally thought someone from the team was standing next to me. Of course, there was nobody there.
We should get back to the other guys, man.
Let's get out of here.
I had never been in a mine before. It was definitely unnerving to be there.
It's just kind of a sad feeling, being in that place.
When we were walking down that mine, we definitely heard something like a footstep. Charity definitely, she was definitely freaking out. I mean, she was breathing so heavy. We were both just like, you know, I was trying to be strong, but it was scary.
I seriously felt like I was hyperventilating, and I still do, and I'm still kind of shaken up about it.
I think Charity was probably, the most freaked out. When you first start going to these places and you start hearing these dark, horrible stories that real life people have lived through, it can be kind of jarring.
It was either 46 or 47. There was this huge plane that crashed right over this hill, and a lot of people that died on the plane crash, they were never identified. So what the town did, they took their bodies and put them here, and so nobody's ever claimed them.
Where did the plane crash?
Right over on this hill.
Oh.
They say hauntings happen around a household. I'm not an expert, but when there's no more houses like Centralia, where do these people go? And when the only place is a cemetery still existing in the town, you think they would go there. And that's where we're going tonight. A lot of people died in Centralia, a lot of coal miners, and there's a lot of death. And they say hauntings happen around a household. And I'm not an expert, but when there's no more houses like Centralia, where do these people go? And when the only place is a cemetery still existing in the town, you think they would go there. And that's where we're going tonight.
My relatives are buried in one of the 4 cemeteries that's left in Centralia. I thought it'd be really cool if we look for my great-great-grandmother and her husband, is kind of the last physical thing of them.
I'll be honest, guys, this doesn't feel right.
What do you mean?
Well, walking around in a graveyard late at night.
Graveyards freak me out in general, as it is. Walking around at nighttime, I did not feel comfortable at all.
Looking for
McKinley. Catherine, and her husband's name was Thomas.
I did have a feeling, though, when we first got there, that I was going to find something.
I see McKinley.
Where, are you serious?
Yeah, right ahead.
Oh my gosh!
I found several of Katrina's family members in this huge graveyard. But I didn't want to be the one to find the headstone that we were really looking for. I wanted her to find it. And that's what happened.
Found it! I kind of felt like I was kind of led there.
I kind of started the trail, and she finished it off.
Thomas died at 42. He was crushed by a piece of coal. This is where, my maternal side comes from. Everybody was from Centralia. They were coal miners. They were hard workers, but there's nothing left of them. Our remaining roots are right here. Mm-hmm. The headstone.
Anything you want to say to him?
I guess I would just like to think they're not roaming around Centralia, that they're where they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of feel they can feel that. You don't have to say it.
I don't know if it was closure that she was looking for or what it was, but standing right there really kind of affected her.
It's just a nice little goodbye to, I don't know, I guess to them in a way. You grow up watching these movies. People, idolize some of these movies, and some of them are, in a weird way, very romantic. People have this kind of tie to them. We met the real people, and it's almost like you're meeting, this iconic figure, and you get to sit with them and talk to them and pick their brain. And, we got firsthand the real life story told to us, and we got to go to the locations with them, have them point things out. You don't get that from the movies, and I think, for me, that's what I'll hold on to.
Yeah.
We just had an incredible week on the road. We had talked to eyewitnesses that haven't spoken about their experiences in decades. And these are some of the most iconic stories in American horror films. And we just got a front row seat to it. And me personally, and I think for Chris, Charity, and John, I don't think it's something any of us will forget anytime soon.